Our discussion on the concepts of centrifugation. Today we will understand further on subcellular fractionation. A typical flow chart outlining the subcellular fractionation protocol is shown in this figure. It is a combination of three different methods. Number 1, homogenization. Number 2, differential centrifugation. Number 3, gradient centrifugation. So depending on the amount of starting material or the source, which would usually range between 1 gram and 500 gram, especially in case of the skeletal muscle preparations, a particular type of rotor and size of centrifuge tube is chosen for individual stages of the isolation procedure. Then the centrifugation, that is repeated centrifugation at progressively higher speed and longer centrifugation period. So you can observe in the figure that the time is gradually or progressively increasing with respect to increase in the G force. So the repeated centrifugation at progressively higher speed and longer centrifugation period will divide the muscle homogenate into distinct fractions. So the typical values for centrifugation steps are 10 minutes for 1000 G force. So this will pellet nuclei and cellular debris, and 10 minutes for 10,000 G force to pellet the contractile apparatus, and 20 minutes at 20,000 G force to pellet out a fraction which is enriched in mitochondria, and 60 minutes at 1 lakh G force to separate the microsomal and cytosolic fractions. Mild salt washes can be carried out to remove myosin contamination of membrane preparations. Then a sucrose gradient centrifugation is used to further separate microsomal subfractions derived from different muscle membranes. So using a vertical rotor or swinging bucket rotor system at a sufficiently high G force, the crude surface membrane fraction, the triad junctions, longitudinal tubules, and terminal cisternae membrane vesicles can be easily separated. How to collect the bands of fractions? The bands of fractions are removed carefully from the top, and this can be achieved manually using a pipette. Alternatively, in the case of relatively unstable gradients or sometimes tight banding patterns, so it's very difficult to collect band of fractions manually with a pipette. So in that case, the membrane vesicles can be harvested from the bottom by an automated fraction collector. Earlier days, people used to pierce, and the fractions were collected by the force of gravity or slowly forcing out of the tube by replacing liquid of higher density. But nowadays we see the use of automated fraction collector. Cross contamination of vesicular membranes is an inevitable problem during subcellular fractionation procedures. So, cross contamination with respect to membrane populations is bound to cause problem during subcellular fractionation procedures. The technical reason for this is the lack of adequate control in the formation of various types of membrane species during tissue homogenization. So, it is in the beginning step itself, because of non-availability of adequate controls, the cross contamination is an inevitable problem. Membrane domains originally derived from a similar subcellular location might form a variety of structures, and these structures include inside out vesicles, right side out vesicles, sealed structures, leaky vesicles, and or membrane sheets. In addition, smaller vesicles might become entrapped in larger vesicles. So, that is also one of the possibility. Different membrane systems might aggregate non-specifically or bind to or entrap abundant solubilized proteins. So, these are all the possibility of various structures when a subcellular fractionation procedure is attempted. Hence, if highly purified membrane preparations are needed for sophisticated cell biological or biochemical studies, then the best choice is affinity separation methodology. So, affinity separation methodology has to be employed. So, some of the terms might be, or you people might not have heard, such as inside out vesicles, right side out vesicles. To make you understand how these vesicles look like, there is an beautiful illustration. We have 4 images A, B, C, D. A refer to right side out vesicle which is sealed, and B refer to inside out vesicle which is also sealed. So, if you carefully observe figure A and figure C, C is leaky right side out vesicle. That means there is an opening across the membrane. So, such vesicles are called leaky right side out vesicles, and D refer to leaky inside out vesicle. The difference between right side out and inside out is that if you carefully observe the movement of H plus, you can make out the difference. So, this is only for your understanding how these structures look like. The flow chart in this figure illustrate both the preparative and analytical principles underlying a biochemical approach. So, I said if highly purified membrane preparations are needed for sophisticated cell biological or biochemical studies, then affinity separation methodology has to be employed. So, in continuation of that, modern preparative affinity techniques they use or using centrifugation steps can be performed with various biological or chemical ligands. So, in the case of immunoaffinity purification, the antibodies are used to specifically bind to their respective antigens. So in this figure, if you carefully observe, widely employed lectin agglutination method is shown. The lectins are plant proteins, as we all know, and they bind tightly to specific carbohydrate structures. The rationale behind using purified wheat germ agglutinin, that is WGA, for affinity purification of sarcolemmal vesicles is the fact that the muscle plasma lemma forms mostly right side out vesicles following the procedure of homogenization. So by contrast, vesicles derived from the transverse tubules are mostly inside out, and thus they do not expose their carbohydrates. And glycoproteins from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, they do not exhibit carbohydrate moieties that are recognized by this particular lectin species. So therefore, only sarcolemmal vesicles are agglutinated by the wheat germ lectin, and then the aggregate can be separated from the transverse tubular fraction by centrifugation for 2 minutes at 15,000 G force. Then the electron microscopical characterization of agglutinated surface membranes revealed large smooth sarcolemmal vesicles. So to remove these vesicular contaminants, which are originally derived from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, immobilized surface vesicles are treated with low concentrations of the non-ionic detergent, for example Triton X100. So this procedure does not solubilize integral membrane proteins, but it introduces openings in the sarcolemmal vesicles for the release of the much smaller sarcoplasmic reticulum vesicles. So the low G force centrifugation is then used to separate the agglutinated sarcolemmal vesicles and other contaminants. Then to remove the lectin from the purified vesicles, the fraction is then incubated with the competitive sugar NAG, that is N-acetyl glucosamine. So this eliminates the bond between the surface glycoproteins and the lectin. And the final centrifugation step for 20 minutes at 1,50,000 G force result in a pellet of highly purified sarcolemmal vesicles. Right. So this is a flow chart or a scheme for subcellular fractionation of the muscle sarcolemma. Now this figure shows a diagram of the protein and antigen binding pattern of crude surface membranes, the lectin void fraction, and the highly purified sarcolemmal fraction. So using antibodies to mark the transverse tubules and the sarcolemma, say for example the alpha subunit of the dihydropyridine receptor of 170 kilodaltons, you can see it in the first figure, and dystrophin of 427 kilodalton respectively, the separation of both membrane species can be monitored. So this analytical method is especially useful for the characterization of membrane vesicles when no simple and fast assay systems for testing marker enzyme activities are available. So in the case of separation of mitochondrial membranes, this is mainly focused with respect to the marker enzymes when we speak about the mitochondrial membrane or the mitochondria separation. The distribution of enzyme activities rather than immunoblotting is routinely used for determining the distribution of the inner membrane, contact zones, and the outer membrane in density gradients. Now, the binding assays or enzyme testing represents the more a conventional or a traditional way of characterizing subcellular fractions following centrifugation. So, if we carefully look at the figure, more orientation on microcompartments of liver mitochondria and the associated marker enzymes. The monoamino oxidase. Now, this is enriched in the outer membrane. The enzyme succinate dehydrogenase is associated with the inner membrane system. That means if you are trying to separate outer membrane, then the marker enzyme will be monoamino oxidase. If it is inner membrane, the marker enzyme will be succinate dehydrogenase. And a representative marker of contact sites between both the membranes is glutathione transferase. The membrane vesicles from intact mitochondria can be generated by consecutive swelling, shrinking, and sonication of the suspended organelles. So it's quite easy approach which even the postgraduate students do in the lab. So the vesicle or vesicular mixture is then separated by sucrose gradient centrifugation into three main types of mitochondrial membranes. The distribution of marker enzyme activities in the various fractions demonstrates that the outer membrane has a lower density compared to the inner membrane. Now, the glutathione transferase containing contact zones, they are positioned in a band between the inner and the outer membrane, because that is a bridge between the inner membrane and the outer membrane, and contain enzyme activities characteristic for both the systems. So, routinely used enzymes as subcellular markers would be sodium potassium ATPase for the plasma lemma, glucose 6 phosphatase for the endoplasmic reticulum, galactosyl transferase for the Golgi apparatus, succinate dehydrogenase for mitochondria, acid phosphatase for lysosomes, catalase for peroxisomes, and lactate dehydrogenase for the cytosol. So, moving further, we have an important concept, that is analytical ultracentrifuges. The analytical ultracentrifuges are high-speed ultracentrifuges. Not only that, they have optical system or systems for recording the sedimentation process. So, the principle remains same, that is the sedimentation process, and they work at high speed but with optical systems for recording the process of sedimentation. As biological macromolecules exhibit random thermal motion, their distribution, that is uniform, that is relative uniform distribution in an aqueous environment, is not significantly affected by the Earth's gravity. So, isolated biomolecules in solution only exhibit distinguishable sedimentation when they undergo immense acceleration, that is at high speed. So, typically it is about 2 lakh g force. So, an analytical centrifuge, ultracentrifuge, it generates a centrifugal field of up to 2 lakh g force in its analytical cell. So, when it is working at this extremely high gravitational field, the ultracentrifuge cell has to allow light passage through the biological particles for proper measurement of the concentration distribution. So, this is the schematic diagram which outlines one of the two principal optical systems for any modern analytical ultracentrifuge. So, the availability of high intensity xenon lamps and advance in instrumental sensitivity and wavelength range has made the measurement of highly dilute protein samples below 230 nanometer as a possibility. Even that is made possible. And analytical ultracentrifuges, they allow the use of wavelength between 190 nanometer and 800 nanometer, especially the Beckman centrifuges. The sedimentation of isolated proteins or even the nucleic acids can be very much useful in the determination of the molecular mass, the purity and shape of these biomolecules. So, three important features can be determined: molecular mass, purity and shape of the biomolecules. Then we have a second optical system. We have discussed previously, that is Rayleigh interference. This detects the distribution of proteins or nucleic acids or even other macromolecules, say for example polysaccharides, glycoproteins, based on their difference in refractive index compared to the solvent in which they are dissolved in. But there are some of the analytical ultracentrifuges, even Beckman has the ultracentrifuge, say for example one such model, the Beckman Optima XL1, uses both the optical systems. So, these two different optical systems can be applied individually or simultaneously, which can be helpful looking at interactions involving biomolecules with ligands. And other less common optical systems are based on fluorescence or refractive gradient sclerin optics. So, they are less common optical systems. Next, if we try to understand the types of analytical centrifuge experiments, there are two types: sedimentation velocity experiment and sedimentation equilibrium experiment. So, there are two main types of analytical centrifuge experiment with respect to experimentation: sedimentation velocity experiment and sedimentation equilibrium experiment. In sedimentation velocity experiment, the change in concentration distribution in the ultracentrifuge cell at high rotor speed is recorded. So what is happening in sedimentation velocity experiment? The change in concentration distribution in the ultracentrifuge cell is recorded at high rotor speeds. So a boundary is formed between solution and clear solvent which is left behind, and the rate of movement of the boundary per unit centrifugal field, that gives the sedimentation coefficient, which is given in this equation which we have previously discussed. So this will be a function of the size, that is molecular mass, and shape, that is based on friction properties of the system. In case of heterogeneous system, the method will give a distribution of sedimentation coefficient. In contrast to sedimentation velocity experiment, the sedimentation equilibrium experiment, an equilibrium or steady state distribution of concentration is obtained. Here in this experiment, lower rotor speeds are used and the centrifugal forces are countered by the back forces due to diffusion, and no boundary is formed as in the case of sedimentation velocity experiments. Right? But instead, after a period of time, an equilibrium is reached and there will be no net movement of macromolecules, hence no frictional force, and the pattern only depends on molecular mass. The two methods, that is sedimentation velocity experiment and sedimentation equilibrium experiment, surely provide complementary information about the macromolecular system, and sedimentation velocity has a high resolution, which is an excellent feature for monitoring the heterogeneity and aggregation, and also for evaluating molecular conformation in solution. Whereas sedimentation equilibrium is an absolute method, it doesn't require any standards for molecular mass and average molecular mass determination. It is true even in case of heterogeneous system. Right? So for systems containing non-covalent assemblies, both methods can provide valuable information about the stoichiometry and strength of self-association reactions or interactions with other molecules. Now if you just look at the application side of the analytical ultracentrifugation, number 1, determination of the purity. Number 2, determination of the average molecular mass. Number 3, examination of any changes in the molecular mass of the supramolecular complexes. Number 4, detection of conformation and conformational changes using sedimentation velocity. Number 5, ligand binding studies. So these are some of the important applications with respect to analytical ultracentrifugation. So with this concept, I believe we have discussed quite a lot on the centrifugation and the underlying principle. So for any doubts, you can refer any of the books or material that is available over the internet for this period, and you can prepare your own notes for easy understanding from examination point of view. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Wish you all the best. I'll stop my discussion over here. Thank you.